I think the connection here is obviously about relationship. You're building rapport, and relationship is so important when it comes to business development. And also, I'd say there's what I try and communicate often is the difference between sales and business development. And in doing it for my whole career, as well as hiring people, I think it's very sort of appropriate from your standpoint, because I've looked at people's resumes and they have this incredible resume and they stink at what they're doing, in terms of hiring. So it's not just about that, and I've learned over the years that there are certain key components, at least in these roles, as it relates to BD, business development, which is a combination of hunting, and there are people that what would be referred to as account managers, but I've renamed them partner development managers, because I really like the word development to be in there, because they're developing a relationship and developing a partnership versus managing an account. And that's very much the sales side. So I think understanding these nuances will also help in terms of the recruiting aspect and what to look for. At least I found them to be quite effective. So, and I'm happy to answer questions about where I've made the mistakes over the years of hiring people and like, oh my God, it's a disaster. And so having to let them go. And they think that they're great, and it's not the case.
And I do traditional BD.
Say it again?
I do traditional BD. We've got a whole team here, so.
Okay, great.
You're reporting back to them with all your tips.
All right, thank you. All right, good. All right, so.
And a couple of us are in deploying a product like deploying Google Fiber.
Okay, good. All right.
With residents and citizens.
Right. All right, so there'll be some, certainly anything related to relationship management is very important. I mean, as I say, and I have a podcast and I'm constantly talking about this on the podcast, so you should all subscribe. It's called Extreme Biz Dev. And is that when it comes to strategic deals, revenue is prioritized last. Now, everyone in the ops world that I work with, it's like, what are you talking about? Where's the revenue? And it's relationship first. This is all when two companies come together. Relationship first, strategic impact second. This is how you're prioritizing what you do and how you interact. And revenue is third, and I view it as revenue is last, because if you prioritize the other two, the revenue is going to come. The opportunity between the two will be achieved or realized. So when we talk about the Sumo Advantage, I'll explain why I use the term Sumo. And again, this is all about a mindset shift. But if you were to ask companies, how do you grow your revenue? Most would say, let's increase sales. Either add more people, increase the quotas, whatever you can do, lower the price, but increase sales, and that's how you increase revenue. And I'm saying that that's not the only way to think about it. Obviously, that's a critical way to think about it. It's important, but is it sustainable? And when I say is it sustainable, it's really, well, if you grow sales, there's always going to be some attrition. So if your goal is to grow sales, you're going to lose some, so you got to make up for that, and then you got to gain even more. So growing is harder because you have to make up for what you've lost. Also, there's always some attrition in the sales transaction. And then what's the X factor to it? So think about that as you sell, it's a one-to-one money, and that's all it is. And I'm saying, from a business development standpoint, there's an exponential impact. And then also, of course, does the sales impact the market? And meaning, if you get a deal, does it really influence the market, change the landscape of the market, to ultimately get it where the market converges on us and we become a pull product? And usually I'm talking from the perspective of a smaller company partnering with a Sumo, and in this case Google would be the Sumo, of course. And I use actually Google as an example, not only in the book, but in this presentation here, just normally, not just for you all, but because it's a great example, I think, of where some entrepreneurs sometimes go wrong. So let's get to what is sales. And so for this discussion, I like to really boil it down to something very, very simple. And I'm not saying that sales is simple. I'm saying when you're thinking about what is the difference between sales and BD, I use paper cups as an example. I'm selling paper cups, and so I'm selling cups, I'm selling more cups, I'm selling more cups. It's a numbers game. I have to get more cups out there, right? I mean, if you're a manufacturer of cups, you got to get those cups out there. The more cups, the better. That is truly sales. your pipeline, your commission structure, everything is based on this metric here. Versus business development, which is vision. You're pitching this opportunity that could happen if these two companies come together. But it's very different from saying, hey, here, I have some paper cups, do you want them? Okay, so we're going to talk about the distinctions between these two here. So what does it mean if you're pitching vision? Well, there are 4 key distinctions that I've identified that are the difference between sales and BD. And so it's important to understand that, because once in my view, once it's identified and defined, what is business development and what is sales? Because a lot of times you'll see these things, what is BD? Does it live in sales? Does it live in marketing? And sometimes it has to because the company doesn't have the resources yet, but if you really want it to flourish, in my view, it's defining it and treating it differently. Because if you treat it differently, then you'll get the right results. So what's the difference? Distinction number 1, BD is very strategic. There's nothing terribly strategic about sales. I mean, there could be some aspects to it. You get a distributor, you get something, but primarily sales, paper cups, I'm selling cups. There's nothing strategic about that. This is very strategic because it's about vision. It's about 2 companies partnering together. So that's distinction number 1. Number 2, there's no direct revenue. So if you think about business development and 2 companies cutting a deal together as partners, the contract is created, and all that is a framework for how the 2 companies are going to work together in the future. Versus sales, there's direct revenue. I am selling you paper cups. We have a, whatever it is, however you want to determine what that contract is. It's just going to be an invoice, an insertion order on something, however you're using it to memorialize the relationship or formalize it. It's purely, I will deliver paper cups on this day. You will deliver money to me at some day after that. Very one-on-one. There's direct revenue. There's no direct revenue in a BD deal. And even if there is sometimes you have to sweeten the deal a little bit, touch something up. There's some infrastructure or technology development that you say, okay, I'll put a little money into that, to the other partner. It's insignificant relative to the size of the opportunity. So you're not, again, judging the deal or managing the relationship based on that transaction. So if you think about managing a relationship in a sales transaction, this gets to the account manager versus the partner development manager side. In account management, this is why I believe account managers, they could have a phenomenal resume, they're not great they're not necessarily great at partner development. And the reason why is because they've sort of evolved their expertise or their experience around a transaction governing the relationship. So let's just say a customer says, you know what, I want more paper cups. Great. Let me give you an order. The answer is yes, absolutely. Oh, we didn't deliver in time. Let me figure out what's going on there. Everything is around pleasing the customer because the transaction exists. I want my money, you want your paper cups, and everything is governed around that. Whether it's telephony service or advertising or whatever, there's clearly a deliverable on each side, and that defines what a sales transaction is. So account managers are very, very good at that, but that doesn't translate into relationship management, or so not necessarily. So they may not be skilled at that. One of the key things that I found to be very good at partner development is to embrace conflict. And we all understand this from a personal relationship standpoint. If anybody's read any books on relationships and gone to any courses or anything, which I have, my wife and I go to these things and it's fun, but it's all about embracing the conflict. And if you don't have any conflict, then you're not growing the relationship. And when I would say conflict, I mean healthy conflict. I'm not talking about beating the crap out of somebody. So you're not doing that with your partner. You're embracing conflict, which means that if the partner has a view of something that's very different from how you envision the relationship, and you truly believe it's not good for the relationship, you have to confront that. And account managers, first of all, generally, a lot of people are not comfortable with conflict. So you have to look for that. And then, even if they are, or account managers really very rarely have conflict in their relationship. I'm so sorry. Very rarely have conflict in their relationship. It's usually, the customer saying, the conflict would be, I'm really pissed I didn't get my cups in time and now I can't sell coffee this week. That's the conflict. And the account manager is, holy shit, I'll get it to you right away. We're going to do an expedited order. We're going to do this. I'm going to reroute, whatever. Please, 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 you know, please the person, please the person, please the person. Because they want the next order. Very, very different as you're thinking about who to hire from a partner relationship standpoint or partner development and account management. Distinction number 3, and we talked about the difference between sales and BD from a vision standpoint. Everyone's plate is full. We're all super busy. No one has a lot of downtime. So whatever you're pitching from a vision standpoint is actually not on somebody's plate, all right? Versus sales, where someone is assigned here to buy paper cups for that coffee shop, right? You can't sell coffee without the paper cups, and someone is, it's their responsibility to get the paper cups. If they don't, they're fired, right? That doesn't happen here. In the majority of cases, no one, when we were going out with TrueCar, and our first big partner was USAA, it's not like they were looking for a car buying solution and how to innovate and change and disrupt the automotive space. In fact, how we got the relationship was they put out an RFP. This is, again, the difference between sales and BD. They put out an RFP for technology for something called an automotive configurator. So this is where you go and you can say I have 2014 Toyota and the Camry comes up, or the other options. It's typical configuration. So they wanted that and they were willing to pay. They wanted to know what the differences were between your configurator and another configurator, and you know, that's what, and we all know RFPs are just about sucking the information out of the market and then figuring out what you're going to do next. So I responded with, that's not what you want. And then I in the RFP painted the vision of what could be. And those are tactics I use to deal with RFPs, and we don't have to get into that now, but the point I'm trying to make is, it was on someone's plate to acquire, in the tech side anyway, to acquire this configuration technology, and they're willing to write a check. So you think about what's going on here. There's nothing strategic about that. Money was going to change hands on the finishing of the agreement, and it was on somebody's plate. So I come in and I say, no. So first of all, that's a commodity and it's free. So there's no reason, and no one else was responding with it's free. Everyone's a couple $100,000 or whatever it is. It's free, so let's just take that issue off the table right away. Because that's not where you want to go. You want to do something bigger for your membership. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with USAA, but right after we signed, it was ranked the #1 customer service brand in the country. It's an incredible organization supporting military and their families. And you could not get anything better than them in terms of being a member or being a partner of theirs, because their brand and their mission is so true north. So, but what I was talking about wasn't on anybody's plate. I had to go through like 6 different people then. Because the person who sent out the RFP and was evaluating that is definitely not the right person for what I'm talking about. So we had to move around. But if I had just responded with whatever the transaction was, that was on somebody's plate. They were ready for configuration. 4th, so those are 3 of the 4, and those I view as factual. Those are the facts around the circumstances of a sales versus BD deal. The 4th is behavioral. So now of understanding how then now some behavior starts to change. And that comes to focusing on the no versus sales, which is focusing on how do I get to yes, ABC, always be closing. Let's close that puppy up, let's do it now. Come on, that's sales, right? This is about focusing on not getting a no. And I say not getting a no because that's all you as a BD person need to be concerned with in the early phase. Because there's no way you're getting a yes. Remember, there's no direct revenue. That person's plate is full and what you're pitching is not on it. Okay? So it's about focusing on not getting a no. And I think this is a good example of someone who wants to jump off a building. Okay? The negotiator comes in, and what does he say? He certainly doesn't start off with, hey, idiot, get down from the building right now, right? Now you're gonna get a no, and the guy's gonna jump, and now he's dead. And you did a terrible job, right? No, it's building rapport, relationship. It all starts with that. It can take as long as is necessary, because he has to focus, this negotiator has to focus on not getting a no, because no means failure, no means this individual now lost their life, all right? There's no way he's getting a yes out of the gate. You can't speed it up like in sales. Hey, listen, I'll shave 10% off if you close before the end of the month so I can make my quota. That doesn't exist in this world. So they're having conversation. They're building rapport. Oh, you have 2 kids? You know what? I've got 2 kids too. Yeah, we had a rough time with my wife and I when we went through this, and whatever is going on in this individual's mind, this negotiator is trying to bond and understand and build a trust relationship. And at some point, there's a change, there's an inflection point, where then you will understand on a BD level, okay, now we can start getting to yes. That question may be, okay, what, the partner, or I refer to as the Sumo, may say, what would a relationship look like? How would we structure this? Okay, now you're starting to get to yes. Now there's opportunity, but it takes a while to get there. The negotiator at some point will feel this inflection point, the bond that happens, and will say, wow, I'm already losing people? It's okay, I'm kidding. We'll say, you know what? Come on, let's go get a cup of coffee. Let's go talk about this. And the guy feels that he has trust with the negotiator and says, okay, I can make that leap, because there's a lot of risk here. Because it's so easy to say no. In the case of BD, remember, someone's plate is full, talked about how there's no immediate revenue, requires additional resources. It's not on their boss's plate. It's not on their boss's plate. So how could you possibly say yes when this person, it's not on their radar, they're not going to get in trouble for saying no, and it's not going to affect their compensation this year, even if they took the risk on it. So it's very easy to say no. We're all into, my plate's full, so how do I get things off my plate? And so that's the behavioral change that occurs, the difference between sales and BD. You cannot use sales tactics that let's speed it up, let's close it faster, or I got to hit my numbers in the quarter when it comes to something like this. In the same way that you can't use traditional sales compensation modeling for these types of people, because you can't rush it. It's going to happen. It's an evolution that occurs, and so you can't bonus someone on a quarterly basis or give them commission based on this. It's not the way to look at it, not the long-term view. So it really requires this evangelic pitch. When you're pitching a big company and all those dynamics exist, it is about this can be large. That's how we got USA and American Express and Consumer Reports and all these other companies. Because we're talking about what could be, and this is going to happen. So I use the term Sumo and Advantage for a couple of reasons. So I like Sumo because Sumo is a warrior contestant. They understand how to deal with an opponent. They understand the rules of engagement. Okay, because they're warrior. Advantage means everyone wants an advantage in the marketplace. So this is the goal that I look for, and what I recommend in terms of entrepreneurs. They always look for. They want to cut the deal with the big guy. It's very hard to do, but they want to get a benefit. They want to get a gain. So Sumo, to me, is a much better terminology, and I'll use the 800-pound gorilla that everyone wants to go for in sales, or the big whale, how do you refer to it. So let's talk about TrueCar for a second. Let's talk about how we went to market, and we're very successful now. Without this BD strategy, we would not be in existence today. We would have been dead. The automotive is a very difficult place to disrupt. And so if you think about, I don't know if you all know what we do, but you come to our website, you put in the car you're looking for, we load up all the transactions that happened in the last, 30 days, 60 days, depending on how much volume is there in the market based on the car. But it's local, you get a regional, you get a national level. You get to see what everybody else paid, which is transparency that when we started, no dealer wants. Right? They never want to give you information, empower the consumer, because they're really about bringing you in, sitting you across from the desk, and then figuring out how to work a deal. Also, our dealers, now we have 7,000 dealers, provide upfront pricing. So before you even give up your anonymity, you're getting a price of what this dealer is going to charge you for that car based on how you configured it. Complete transparency upfront. They can't communicate. Okay, this is like 8.5 years ago when we started the company, or 9 years ago now. This is not how the world was working, right? So now imagine going to our sales force. This is how BD helps accelerate sales. So imagine our sales force, which is people on the street signing up dealerships. That's where the sales happens. That's a typical sales strategy that we use. They would knock on the dealer's door, and there's 500 different companies knocking on a dealer's door every week. Hey, we're launching a new website called TrueCar.com. And we're going to show all the transactions that occur to give complete transparency, calculate what a good price is, what an overprice is, and we want you to provide upfront pricing. Okay, and I know you don't do any of these things today, and you would actually hate it, for consumers to have this information, but this is what we want you to do. Do you imagine what a dealer's going to say? Get out. I mean, they will throw you out, escort you out, Get out of here, I want you to die because you're the devil. So we wouldn't be in existence. And then we have a chicken and egg issue. Even if they were interested, we got past the get out, I want to kill you, the next question will be, how many visitors do you have? We don't have any visitors because we need the dealers to get the visitors, so we need you first so that we can then attract consumers. Yeah, call me back when you have some traffic. Or the next question would be, well, what's your quality? Oh, well, we don't know what the quality is yet because we don't have any visitors because we need the dealers. And then so now we're in limbo. So that's not how we went to market. We'd be dead today if we went to market that way. There's no way we could have disrupted this behavioral change, leveraging just our own brand and starting out from scratch. So what did? We had a heavy BD model where we went out and we private labeled Capital One, USAA, Consumer Reports, American Express, Geico, Nationwide, Progressive. We have over 100 brands that we power for. And now the conversation changes. So now, before we had a website, before we had any customers coming in, we're walking into dealers and we're saying, hey, do you want to be part of the USAA car buying service and be a USA certified dealer? The answer is yes, almost 100% of the time. If you're in a military town and you're a dealer, you want to be that dealer. You want to make sure that you are, and you certainly don't want to be in a situation where you're not and your competitor is. And remember, the competitor is the other Toyota store in the market, not Toyota versus Nissan. They actually don't compete amongst brands. They compete in their own brand. So now we're over that issue. But never did we have a question, how many customers do we have? Because the answer was, well, USA has at the time 8 million members. So they're like, oh, great. No, not one of them visited the site yet, because we didn't have a site, but it didn't matter. And now we're saying, by the way, we need that change. We want the upfront pricing. Okay, you know what? For USA members, I'll do it. So that's how we created change. Absolutely would have. There's no way we would have gotten it done without leveraging the Sumo in this space. So, and this is an example of what these sites look like. Okay, this is American Express's site. This is us on our servers. But we've adopted American Express. It's seamless. You log in, all that information gets transferred, so you don't have to re-enter. The forms pre-pop when you're ready to submit your information. So it's very, very seamless. So there's an integration strategy there, integration component to it. This is Consumer Reports. Again, this is us. So that's how we went to market to leverage that brand. Then, of course, we launched TrueCar.com much later on, where we had the base of dealers already. Now, Sumo versus gorilla. All right, we're all familiar with the term, let's get the 800-pound gorilla in the space, or that is the 800-pound gorilla. Gosh, if I can land them for paper, someone is selling paper cups, gosh, if I can get Starbucks, that's the 800-pound gorilla in the space they want. Here's the problem with the gorilla, in my view, when you're talking about strategic deals. Okay? They're not big into thought here. Okay? And there's all these books that talk about go getting the whale, close that whale, get the big sale, get the 800-pound gorilla. And that's great. That will bring you a pile of cash. There's nothing wrong with a pile of cash. Okay? We all love cash. But what you're not getting out of the gorilla is the critical thinking. And that's where a Sumo works well. So Sumo gives you exponential power, right? Because you're leveraging the Sumo's assets. If you're going to fight in the ring, remember, you're cutting this deal. We cut the deal with USAA so that we can compete in our market, not compete in USA's market. We were leveraging their assets. So now when you're going to market, you're taking the Sumo, who's standing behind you, and you've got all the assets of the Sumo, and they're a warrior. They know how to compete in the ring. They understand the rules of engagement. And now you're leveraging the strategy that they can bring in, how they execute. They understand how to prioritize. They understand how to improve. Gorilla doesn't do that. Gorilla's just sheer power. So when you're talking about a sales deal, and the gorilla says, I want more cups, you better get them more cups. Or you've messed up the delivery. You better fix that. That's what a gorilla gives you. Good volume, big money, but also there's a different level of support there. Versus the Sumo, when you're competing, you have this guy on your side. All right? And so, of course, then you get to compete, and you're leveraging the Sumo's power. So when we're out in the market, we're saying, we're now as big as USAA. We don't have $1 of revenue yet. We don't have one visitor to the site. But we're now in the market as big as USAA. That's the unique difference between BD and sales. Now, that doesn't mean that it isn't good to say, hey, we provide paper cups for Starbucks. Okay, there's credibility there. You can deliver on time, you can mass produce. There's all the advantages to that. But that's not going to convert. That's not going to necessarily get the market to converge. We're trying to change the market. We're trying to change dealer behavior. We're trying to change market understanding. We're trying to get consumers to come in and adopt this strategy that we're also embrace the information. So a lot that has to go on there. So in the organization, there's a product layer, there's a sales and marketing layer, and what I'm saying, there's a BD layer that needs to be installed to help with sales and marketing. And really the BD layer bolts onto product. So the product people need to understand that if you're going to go after the strategy, that there may be some product augmentation. It's not, you're not going to build a whole new product, but in the case of our platform, you know, we had to accommodate the idea that, wow, we're going to power USAA, and USA members are going to log in, and when they come to our site, over to us, we're not going to ask them to log in again. That would be a disconnected experience, especially under the same brand. So we need to deal with security issues, and we need to deal with the handshake capabilities of transferring the data, all understanding what USA is. And USA is so crazy on the security side, just to give you an understanding. For us as a small company starting out, for us to do the deal with them, we thought we were fairly secure already, and we had to stroke $1 million check just to increase the infrastructure on the security side to deal with USA. $1 million just on security, it doesn't generate revenue. It's tough when you're talking about a startup. But we did it because we understood the opportunity there. And that's very hard. The ROI on that is 0 in the first year, in the first 2 years. It's not something you need to think about. So here's what happens when I believe when you install a BD layer from a revenue standpoint. And so your revenue is going to grow. Of course your revenue is going to grow if you're a thriving business. But with BD, and the out years, it grows faster. All right, there's a big difference between going the normal path on your own and increasing the your revenue. And actually, I just on this week's podcast that just launched, I had Greg Brager, who's the president of NASDAQ Private Market, and I don't know if you're familiar with them. They launched it. It's basically for private companies to get some liquidity. And he had his company shares post, and he realized, wow, you know what? I can go along a course. That's fine. And he did like 1.8, I think it was $1 billion, $1.2 billion in the first 18 months of his business of transactions, and that was because of Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter before they went public. Maybe not LinkedIn, but certainly Facebook and I think Twitter. But you know, it's hard. He didn't have the credibility, so he cut a deal with NASDAQ. I mean, how can you get any better than that? Now NASDAQ then has the advantage of going upstream, but his revenue, he spent over a year. He cut that deal a long time ago. Spent over a year developing, building, doing these things. So in the first year, your revenue is not going to change. That's the key. That's the thing to look at when you're talking about investing in a Sumo, in a BD layer, in a partnership. You can't look at ROI over a 1-year period. You have to look at ROI over a 3-4 year period, the long term. And in his perspective, he's going to achieve much more than he could have achieved on his own. Leveraging NASDAQ and all the assets of NASDAQ in what he's going after. And it's not like NASDAQ wants to go after that. NASDAQ wants the relationship for upstream. These companies eventually will go public. They'll have a relationship with NASDAQ, that type of thing. But he knows that he would be here on his own. And he knows with the Sumo, he'll be here. And it's the same thing with TrueCar and other examples. So let me give you, I think the next is an example. Oh, no, okay. So when you're thinking about BD versus sales, it's about thinking strategically. And there's questions always, why partner? Because you think about you want to go to market, why do you partner? Well, you want to borrow credibility, we talked about that. Solving the chicken and egg issue. There's differentiation. When we're going to market, we're definitely different. There's no one else representing USAA to the dealer community other than us. We are completely different than Edmunds and Auto by Tail and others that are selling out there. No one else has access to this membership base. American Express, Black Card, Gold Card, Platinum Card like we do. We are different, period. Risk, can mitigate some risk as you go to market by leveraging the assets of that Sumo. Better platform for disruption, certainly if you're in a space where you want to disrupt, leveraging, again, the weight of the Sumo to help you compete in your organization, in your market is key. And then, of course, enterprise value. And again, I talk to a lot of smaller companies and they're raising capital, and you cut a deal like this, it's usually a valuation doubler. And for them at an early stage is very important. So that's the Sumo versus the Gorilla. And now let's use an example of Groupon. This is where Google plays it. So Groupon, we're all familiar with Groupon, I'm sure. Okay? And Groupon went public in November of 2011 at 25 bucks, and over time cratered down to whatever it went down low of 4, 5, 7, $4, $3, and then it's climbing back up in the 10, 11, 12 range. I don't even know where it is at today, but clearly a lot less than when they went public. Everyone who bought stock lost money, pretty much. Okay, so let's look at Groupon as an example of, in my view, having no strategic thought whatsoever, or installing a BD layer, I should say. So Google comes along and says, hey, I want to buy you for $6 billion, I think it was. And you know what Groupon said? We all know. No, forget it. I'm not hooking up with you. Now, if you're Groupon and Google is knocking on your door and saying, hey, I want to buy you, and you say no, what should you assume? Google's going to come in and try and kick your ass afterwards, right? Because there's no barrier to entry in this space. So Google goes, all right, we all know, and then Google offers its own, builds Google offers. All right, that was inevitable. And there's 100 different companies that do these flash sales now, right? So this is why Groupon is in trouble. This is why Groupon is struggling to get back. Because the market's saturated with this. Every yoga studio and sandwich shop is getting bombarded by all these people. And you know what, if I'm gonna pick Groupon, okay, they deliver some value. Oh no, I want to be on Google. Okay, there's an advantage that Google has. Brand, the president's being aligned with Google. There's so many aspects to that. And Google's just bigger, and it's hard to compete. So Groupon did do a strategic deal, but this is where I say I don't think it was the right one. It's an okay deal, but they did a deal with Expedia for partnership for the travel. But that's not why people and consumers go to Groupon. They're not looking to spend $1,000 on a trip or $500 on a trip. They're looking to spend $11 for $30 of yoga, activity, right? So they cut a deal, and it actually didn't help them. They said, I don't want to deal with travel, so we'll just give it out. But they weren't leveraging the Sumo to help compete with Groupon. With Google. Because Google wasn't going to focus on travel. Google's focusing on the sandwich shops and the yoga studios, right? And the hair salons. Exactly where Groupon's space is, and so is everyone else is doing it. So, as an example of another company that had a strategic view of what to do, Living Social. Familiar with Living Social? Okay, they came up at the same time as Groupon. Living Social sees Google getting in the space and says, holy shit, what are we going to do? We need to think about this. Because no one wants to compete with Google, right? So, what do? They cut a deal with Amazon and create Amazon Local. That's a smart deal. If you're going to compete with Google, I'd say the next company to think about is Amazon. That is a deal that says, okay, I'm prepared for the market. I see what's coming, I need some differentiation, and I need some power. So when Living Social is knocking on the yoga studio's door, and Groupon is, and the other 100 companies, and they say, okay, well, which one am I going to choose? Well, Living Social is now as big as Amazon. The integration is there. So if you're on Amazon, and you're logged in, and you buy an Amazon local product or a service or whatever that is really powered by Living Social, you don't have to re-enter information. They use the Amazon credit card. All that stuff exists. It's really, really simple. Amazon's got a great reputation, obviously. It's growing group of customers, spending a lot of money. So if you're thinking about where do I want to go, you know what, I want the clientele from Amazon. I don't know what clientele Groupon is getting, but I know what clientele Living Social is getting. And if you're a yoga studio, you want a certain type of clientele. You don't want someone who's always looking for the discount, because then you'll never make money. The idea is bring them in, introduce them to what I can do, and then ultimately they can pay. And Amazon has an affluent demographic too. So this is a big difference here, and this is how I look at how to address the market. And so others will ask often, well, how do you identify a sumo? And so the easiest way to do it, there's multiple ways of doing it, but the easiest way is to think about, if someone else did a deal, if my competitor did a deal with another company, how am I going to get screwed? So Living Social is saying, wow, if Groupon did a deal with Google, that's going to screw me. Now, they didn't do the deal, but then Google gets in the space anyway. So if I have to compete with Google, and Google's going to go acquire Groupon, what should I do? All right, I need to go cut a deal with Amazon. So you're thinking about how you can get hurt so you're either going to do that deal or counter and do a different deal or figure out how you're going to respond, because you have to assume that that deal is going to get done. So Sparefoot's another example of a company local here in Austin. Very similar to TrueCar, different, I mean, from a modeling standpoint, not in terms of what they do. Largest inventory of largest inventory of storage facilities. And you think, storage facilities, how exciting is that? These guys are killing it right now. I think they just raised 50 million, another 50 million. So they're crushing the market. And what they're doing is they're going and saying, you know, there's the Publix, which are the big storage facilities, and that's one right there. And then there's all these other guys that need to compete with Publix. It's hard for them to do it. So Sparefoot is this marketplace. You come online, you get to see what the price is for that cube, what's available, and then you can book it right there, right? And so they're helping the smaller guy compete where they couldn't do it on their own. So Sparefoot's leveraging that. Now, but what does Sparefoot need? They need traffic, right? And they need good quality traffic. So what did they do? You know, they're doing their SEM and, of course, optimizing as much as they can with SEO, but they're looking for ways to get really good quality traffic embedded at the time when a person needs it. So what do? They cut a deal with Penske truck rental, right? So now you got all these people calling Penske saying, hey, I want to book a truck. Great, now Penske can offer, do you need storage? And a certain percentage of the time they do. And you know what, if a person needs storage and they book it through Sparefoot through the Penske, Penske's close rate goes up substantially in terms of them booking a truck. Because right now, Penske is, you know, someone's calling up and saying, what's your rate versus U-Haul's rate? And right now, U-Haul has storage facilities. They do trucks and storage. Penske doesn't do the storage side. They don't want to get into it. So Penske's winning by getting access to more facilities than what U-Haul has, 8,000, 7,000, whatever it is, with upfront pricing right there in all these different facilities so they can find the best price in the market. Plus, they're able to, because of some revenue sharing, they're able to supplement even their pricing on Penske. So now if you call and you do the bundle, your actual rate for your truck could be lower. So when you're thinking about competing, how am I going to compete with, or if I'm making a choice of Penske or U-Haul, oh, well, the Penske truck's cheaper. Because I got to do the storage anyway. So there's an advantage to both. But that's how Sparefoot, and now that Sparefoot is bringing this down to their facilities and saying, listen, we have Penske volume here. You can't get that on your own. You want to sign up for Sparefoot. So these are hard deals to win, but they can be won. Usually it's from the perspective of a small guy getting the attention of the big guy. Us trying to get the attention of a Google. It's hard to do. Or Amazon or any of these others, you know. So strategic partnerships, it requires a change to embrace this. One is a mindset shift, different from sales, how you're gonna build, what type of people you're gonna hire, how you're gonna compensate them. People, we're just talking about that, different types of people, embrace sales versus BD. The process could change for how you manage them, how you're going to organize the company around the resources necessary to execute on a deal, and then culture. There needs to be a culture shift. Embracing the idea that a strategic deal is going to bring value, but it's not going to bring value now, not in the next year. And we're all crunching for our numbers. It's hard. This is not, it's not easy to embrace this. I have more challenges internally sometimes getting a deal done because the COO or the CTO is like, what's the ROI on this? And my answer is, there's no ROI on this. Stop asking the question. That's not the right question. What's the opportunity is the right question. But they don't like to deal in that because it's too soft. So that is the Sumo Advantage. Yeah. And so the term Sumo Advantage is an entrepreneur's alignment with a major market force, capability or accelerator with the intent to grow market share and crush your competition. So I always talk about small companies should be thinking about how to gain a Sumo advantage and when they're competing in the market. The Amazon local with Living Social is a great example of that. So that's it, thank you. I am a partner in Capital Factory, and if any of you ever want to come down, hang out, take a tour, talk to others, it's such a great place. There's so much energy there. Entrepreneurs are all over the place and always looking for more information and just meeting people. So it's a great place to be. Email me if you're interested. Also, have a podcast, Extreme Biz Dev. It's fun, love it. So if you know of any deals that are happening, email me as well. You can just email me bd@bernybrenner.com or get me on Twitter or something. And I always need more content. I always love giving exposure to deals that happen. So that's it, and I'm happy to answer questions. So what's the first one? Anybody have any? Yes.
So how do you quantify the success of someone in BD as opposed to sales if they are separate?
So in terms of the BD pipeline, because that's how you're measuring performance here. Let's identify the hunters first. So the hunters, so the typical sales pipeline. I'm selling paper cups. Okay. This way more?
Yeah, just it's.
Oh, sorry, okay.
You get washed out on the screen there.
Got it.
Sorry.
I'm selling paper cups. So typical sales forecasting is, all right, I've pitched companies that buy 100,000 paper cups a month or a quarter, and my probability of closing this month is 10%, so I'm gonna sell 10,000 cups. All right, that's how you're measuring that. BD is different. So there's what I've embraced versus that, because you don't want them focused on the revenue, especially since there isn't any when they first close. You want to focus on closing. So there's stages of a BD deal. So there's targets, and then there's pitches, and then the next phase is let's move to a non-disclosure agreement. And then after that, they could fall out, so they can go inactive. Or then you move to a term sheet, and then to an agreement, and then you're launching. So I may say, all right, we're going after the insurance vertical TrueCar. All right, and let's say at the time we have no insurance guys. We have pretty much all of them now. But we want to align with 3 insurance companies this year, right? So, and I want to have, and there's of the top 10, let's just say. So I want 7 of the top 10 pitched in H1, first half of the year. All right, I want 4 of them, or let's say that's not right. So 2 of them to go to an NDA in H1, and I want 1 of them closed in H1. Let's just say that's reasonable. It's practically not with those big companies, but that's the way you're doing it. And by the end of the year, we need to have 3 launched or 2 launched or whatever that metric is, whatever you think is important and reasonable. If we already had 5 on board, then getting the next 5 is actually easier than the first 5. So you're measuring them in stages, and I want to have 3 in this phase, and 2 in this phase, and 1 in this phase, and whatever. And if they don't hit it, then it affects their bonus. But it's bonus structure, and they're measured on this identification of the number in each segment. So let's say it's insurance, and then membership, and then financial institutions. So we would have different numbers to hit for each one. And then in the and their bonus is made up primarily of their performance, and then a certain percentage, let's say 25%, is based on company performance. And everyone gets options in TrueCar. So that's how I view it. So they have to hit phases, and if they're not hitting it, then it's very clear. So you have to identify the objectives, but it's not close this many this month or this quarter.
It must be tough to assess like the quality of the relationship, right?
Well, the relationship, you mean the quality of the opportunity or the relationship that they're building?
The relationship with them.
Yeah, but you're meeting with them, you're doing one-on-ones, you're understanding how they're communicating and what's going on. You're seeing enough activity to understand whether they're progressing or not. And look, it took me 4 years to get consumer reports. Because that deal, they're a nonprofit, they think there's no way we can get into helping a consumer buy a car, we're just about information. It took a long time to convince them from a visionary standpoint that they're actually failing their members by just giving them information. So, you'll get an idea. I don't find that to be that hard. It's more of understanding. Like if you haven't pitched 10, what is your problem? You're not getting in the door right. So that's sort of a talent assessment right there. If they just can't get in the door right, they don't know how to. They're just either they're junior and they need to be brought up properly and mentored properly, or if they're a senior person they can't do it, then you got to move them out. Maybe a different role, but they're not doing it. Now on the relationship side, afterwards the PDMs, that's a different story. So I say to them, partner development managers, I want you to identify a 3-year agenda. What are all the things you can do with that partner over the next 3 years? Put them all down. No timeline. Just put them all down, all the opportunities. Now, what do you think you can get done in the next 6 months? You're not going to get it all done, but what do you think is reasonable? Or the next year? And you give that to the partner. You're not giving the partner 3 years of things to think about. It's just too much, and they need to focus, and it's unreasonable, and there's no way you're going to get it. But if you focus on what we can do in the next 6 months, you probably get half of that. And then you're seeing how that's progressing. And if you didn't get the meaningful ones, and you can see as things are being deployed, how the relationship is building. Because if you're not getting the meaningful ones, if you're not getting the ones that are hard to do, then the relationship isn't progressing properly. That make sense? Yeah. So you can see this has big impact. Let's blast out an email to 10,000 members of the organization, and let's say the organization has 10 million. Okay, that's called a test. all right? If they don't get to 500,000 or 1 million that year, then something's wrong. Either the test didn't work, or they're just not taking you, they're blowing you off. Make sense?
Sure.
Okay. So that's how I do that. Yes?
I'm interested in the piece where you talked about like the evangelical pitch, and not, maybe you can speak to it to TrueCar just from like a brand agnostic piece, but what do the big companies tend to respond to? Like, it's kind of like it has to touch their spirit
Yeah.
and inspire them, like maybe innovation gets thrown around a lot. If you can talk about like ways to frame the pitch and what speaks to the
So this gets,
guys.
good question. This gets back to the not getting a no. Okay, so you think about, first I start off with the assumption that in most cases, not Google's case, because you guys are truly unique, but entrepreneurial efforts rarely work in a big corporation. That's why they acquire so many companies. Either they don't want to take the risk, they don't have the energy, they're not assigning the people properly. You guys are different, but in most cases, inside efforts don't work from a startup standpoint. So you going in and saying to a big company, hey, this is my vision and this is gonna happen. And you're doing it, this evangelic pitch, with such conviction that this is gonna happen whether you're on the train or not. This train's moving. Are you at the train station, or are you on the train? And all it is making them think, shit, do I not want to be on the train? I mean, really, it's that type of thing. I don't want to say no to a train that's moving when I want to move in that direction, so I can't say no yet. And you're creating this opportunity, but it's really about this conviction. We are going to make this work. We've raised whatever amount of money, or we have this many people, and we are focused on this one thing. You're welcome, thanks. We're focused on this one thing, and we're going to get this to work right. And you know what? This could be great for you too. Now, a lot of times they don't think how great it's going to be, but sometimes, because they think, well, we're big, how can you really do this for us? But it's the idea of that, wow, if I don't do this, do I want to be the person that says no to this? Right? And so it's sort of that balance of keeping them intrigued enough so that you don't get the no, but with absolute conviction that this is going to happen. That's one way. The other way is a part of that conviction is to use something that I refer to as triangular attraction. So I give you an example. In '97, I founded a company called Promise Mark, and this was in the internet security privacy space, identity theft, before it exploded and became real big. So I thought that was going to be a big opportunity. And it was taking a different approach to the problem. It was dealing with viruses and firewalls and all that other crap that the technology is working with, but putting a service component to it with basically a warranty and insurance policy that, hey, listen, if you ever get a virus and it messes up your computer, we'll fix it for free. You lose your data, we'll get it back, no problem. You're a victim of identity theft, we'll fix the problem. We have people here, and we'll cover you for $100,000 worth of damage or whatever. Back then, we were the pioneers in this. So in order to launch this company, I had no money. I did not raise any money yet, or any big money. I had probably a little seed money. I'm sitting in my basement, okay, and I'm negotiating with these two multi-billion-dollar companies. One of them, and it's just me, one of them is a company called Aon Warranty Group, which was the largest specialty underwriter in the world for warranties and administration of warranties. And then the other was Symantec for Norton. So I'm calling each of them, and I'm saying, hey, you need to be part of this. And then I'm saying, the other one, you need to be part of it. And of course, none of them have a reason to be part of this. They're like, it's too much risk. Is this really going to be big and all this stuff? So what I had to do was say, well, listen, when I was talking to Aon, the Aon Warranty Group, I'm saying, listen, Symantec is involved in this. They're really interested, which was true. I'm in dialogue with them. At that point, Aon, you can't say no. They're like, holy crap, well, the train is moving. And Symantec may be on it, another multi-billion-dollar company. All right, I can't say no to this yet. Now, when I'm on the phone with Symantec, I'm saying, Aon Warranty Group, the largest specialty underwriter in the world, who provides all the warranties for, at the time, CompUSA, when it was still around, and Staples, and this one and that one. They're interested in taking this, in supporting this product and taking the market too. At that point, Symantec couldn't say no. They weren't saying yes yet, but there's no way. Again, I'm communicating this, what's going to happen, and this train is moving. And at that point, they were each validating. I was leveraging them to validate what I was doing, which is they couldn't say no because Symantec, if Aon's in it, it could be a problem for Symantec. They want to be involved, and they'd rather be involved than McAfee being involved. And same thing with Aon. If Symantec's involved, All right, well, Bernie can get underwriting in other places. We're the largest specialty underwriter. We should be involved in this. And it ultimately worked. And we went to market, and then I sold the company to Experian. So that's how I use the pitch, the evangelic conviction that these companies should at least be talking to me. Okay, not everyone's going to say yes. But even when they don't say yes, it takes Consumer Reports never said no to me. It took 4 years to do the deal. I never got a no. They got, well, I don't know if we can do this, we can't do this, it doesn't seem right. That wasn't a flat out, don't call me again, Bernie. I never got a no. It took 4 years to get a yes, but I never got a no, and that's what you want. Okay? Other questions? All right. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate your time. Everyone, if you copy the book, I brought some